Welcome to the Special Olympics Coach Webinar Series, proudly supported and presented by Gallagher and in partnership with ICOACHKIDS. Today, we have simultaneous interpretation. This webinar offers simultaneous interpretation in Spanish. So please select the interpretation button at the bottom of the screen and select Spanish channel. We have Q&A. Please ask any questions you have in the Q&A section. And today, we are talking about reflective practice. And don't forget to subscribe to the next week for the developing the whole person. So today we are going to talking about reflective practice with such amazing presenters today. We are so glad to be here with you guys, and I hope you enjoy. And also, my name is Emanuelle Dutra. I will be the host for you guys today. And I am a Special Olympics athlete from Brazil. And also I'm Sargent Shriver International Global Messenger representing Latin America region. I started in Special Olympics in 2013. And in 2014, I participated in the national games with my team on football, females football. And then we got the chance to represent my country, Brazil, at the World Games in Los Angeles, 2015. But 2 months before the games, I twisted my left knee, and I thought I couldn't make it to the World Games. And it was a very sad moment to me because I was very sad because I didn't know if I was able to attend or not, if I was able to help my teammates or not. But do you guys know who was there for me? Yes, my coach. My coaches was there for me, supporting me, motivating me, telling me that everything would be okay. And even if I wasn't believing in myself, wasn't believing in, in getting better for the World Games, he was there for me. So my coach is a great person that helps me with my motivation, with my self-esteem, to giving me courage. And then he arranged physiotherapies twice a week so I could make it to the World Games. And then I am such a lucky person to have him in my life. And remember that you have an athlete too, and you may be the person that will change the whole life of your athlete. So support your athlete, be there for your athlete, encourage your athlete, because coaches are very important people for us. Coaches are always there for us. And I used to say that my coach is like my second father because I really, really like him, and he's very important for me. So please, that's one of the things I tell you guys as an athlete. Support your athletes. Get to know your athlete. Always be there for your athlete. So I will present the first panelist today, Dr. Emmy Whitehead. She's a Reader Associate Professor in Sports Psychology and Coaching at Liverpool John Moores University. Her research and applied practice focus on the use of thinking aloud. Dr. Whitehead is also an accredited sport and exercise psychologist, British Psychological Society, and worked as a consultant with a variety of athletes and coaches. Welcome, Dr. Emmy Whitehead.
Thanks, Emanuelle, and thanks for that great introduction to today. Hi, everyone. Like Emanuelle has already mentioned there, I'm an associate professor at Liverpool John Moores University, and for the next 15 minutes, I'm going to talk you through hopefully a novel method of reflective practice that some of you may or may not have come across before. So the session itself will hopefully get you to consider how we currently reflect in our coaching, kind of why it's important that we think about reflecting in action, so in the coaching session and on action after the session. I'll introduce you to Think Aloud in terms of what it is, how you might be able to use it as a coach, and then I'll show you some examples of some of the work I've done previously with a variety of different coaches. I'll show you some examples of coaches using Think Aloud and some reflections from a coach that I've worked with previously. So for me, and if you haven't come across Daniel Kahneman's work, he does a great TED talk on kind of how we experience life and how what we remember about life. And I kind of base the Think Aloud work that I'm going to talk to you about on kind of this Daniel Kahneman's concepts around the experiencing self versus the remembering self. So Daniel talks about how we experience our coaching or life or kind of anything is very different to how we remember it and what we decide to keep. So he talks about these two types of selves, the experiencing self and the remembering self. And like I've just mentioned, the experiencing self is kind of how we experience second to second, minute to minute, how you're experiencing this workshop today, right now. And then tomorrow will be your remembering self in terms of what you remembered from this workshop. Hopefully a lot of really good things. But in terms of the remembering self, this is more around what you decide to keep, what you maintain from that experience. And a lot of the times what we remember is very much based on kind of what happens at the end of an event, and also maybe a couple of critical moments throughout that experience. So we can't remember all of our experiences. And I think if we link this back to coaching, we need to think about, well, what do we remember and reflect on from a coaching session? And Daniel Kahneman calls this a cognitive trap, because what we remember can be very much distorted around what happens at the end of an event. So for example, you could be having a really good day and a really good experience and a really good coaching session, but maybe one thing at the end might not have been particularly positive, and that might shift how you remember that experience and create a really positive experience into a negative memory. And Daniel uses this example, so please do have a watch of the TED Talk, because I have stolen this slide, so I just want to credit that TED Talk for this slide. And it's really important this is a really nice example, because Daniel Kahneman does a lot of work kind of in how people experience pain, and he's got a kind of an experiment here where you've got two patients undergoing the same procedure. So patient A and patient B both undergoing exactly the same procedure, and every 60 seconds they're asked to report kind of how much pain they're in out of 10. Now what you can see here is that patient A does experience quite high levels of pain, but over a short period of time, whereas patient B experiences kind of, you know, similar amounts of pain and then over a longer period of time. And as patient B gets towards the end of the procedure, the pain lowers. And when we ask people, you know, which patient do you think suffered the most? Most of us would say, well, patient B suffered the most because they had pain over a longer period of time. But actually, when asked to report when we asked patient A and patient B who suffered the most, patient A reports suffering more than patient B. And this is very much around their experience and how they felt at the very end of that procedure. So again, linking that back into our coaching practice, what do we reflect on, and how do we make sure that we're not just remembering and reflecting on kind of how we felt at the very end of a session, or sometimes the outcome of a coaching session, or a game or a match or a performance. If we've lost, sometimes we might then remember that event as less pleasurable, less successful, less positive than we might if the end might have been slightly different. So you might be asking, you know, what's all this got to do with coaching, and why are we talking about people's experiences of pain? But I think when I started doing research in the coaching field around 10 years ago, and we looked at how people traditionally reflect, or how coach education is like kind of promotes reflection, it was very much after the event, retrospective, through reflective diaries, journals, workbooks, etc. So the question for me is kind of, how much are we losing when we are reflecting? Because if we're only reflecting on the memory, then how much of the experience are we losing? And you know, what important things about our coaching practice might we not reflect on? So this is where Think Aloud comes in. And Think Aloud is all about verbalizing our thoughts out loud during the coaching process. Now, you might think that is might be slightly uncomfortable, or if you're stood next to an athlete, then that's inappropriate, and that's correct. But what we promote with the use of Think Aloud with coaches is, where possible, we ask coaches to step back from a coaching session and verbalize into a clip mic. So I give coaches little clip microphones that connect to dictaphones, or they can use their wireless headphones with their mobile phones, and to just to verbalize what they're thinking during different times of a coaching session, and then to reflect on that thought process or that feeling as it happens. And then all of these thoughts and reflections are being recorded during the session. So what this does, it helps us to capture the experience as it's happening. So we are kind of reflecting on the experiences during the coaching session. It helps us then to kind of store that into our memory. It makes it easier to recall. It's also recorded, so we can listen back. And then it stops us ignoring some of the experiences that we sometimes unconsciously forget. And they might be some of the things that we need to work on the most. Here's a video of an example of a tennis coach who's using Think Aloud for the first time. So one of the things that this coach is working on is his questioning with his athlete and trying to give the athlete some ownership and autonomy in the coaching process. So what you'll notice is that he's not thinking aloud during the whole video, but what he does do, he thinks aloud and then reflects after he's interacted with the athlete.
Real of the boys. All of the boys.
One sec. How are you feeling right now, Abby? What are your feelings?
Not too good.
Okay. That's perfectly understandable. Can you give me a bit more information? What you're feeling?
Annoyed that I'm missing like the first ball.
Okay. What do you think's the best way forward?
Don't miss the first ball. Taking time.
Okay. And do you think it's normal to feel how you're feeling?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough drill. Yeah, it's a real tough drill. You're receiving a tough feed, and the opponents are right on it. Any response that you give, and you're out of position. Yeah. So I think the key is to try to accept that, keep giving your best, commit to each individual shot at a time, stay positive, all right, and reset yourself really well. Okay? Okay.
4-0.
Just thinking aloud after intervening with Abby. Obviously, taking part in a really tough drill, if the first ball is not effective, then she automatically loses the point. She's in a defensive situation. Obviously really struggling, but my sense was that letting her talk about how she was feeling and verbalising that did help in that moment. So we'll see how she does right now, but she seems to have a better look of focus and more positive look about her right now.
So what you can see there is that the coach is reflecting on the type of questioning and the questions that is asked his player, and he's also reflecting on how he thinks she's kind of responded to that. Once the coaches get through this initial process of reflecting on their athlete and the communication and the feedback and things like that are really important in the coaching process, I also try and get coaches to think about how they think that they've communicated effectively, and what is it about them and their coaching that might have influenced the coaching session. So we do start off quite kind of superficial, looking at the surface level kind of coaching behaviours, and then we start to dig a little bit deeper into the coach's own thoughts and feelings about their actions, their language, and why they coach in the way that they do. And then following this Think Aloud process, and I'll talk you through kind of the Think Aloud program that I've created next, but what I want just to highlight here is that it doesn't just end with thinking aloud during a coaching session. I really encourage coaches to then listen back to this audio file and really think about kind of what is it that they're reflecting on during a coaching session. What is it that they observe about themselves as coaches within that session, and not just coaches, but as individual people? How does, sometimes we discuss values and individual and personal values and how that reflects in their coaching. We then talk about why they are reflecting on these things. So why are these things so important to this coach at a particular time? Where have these ideas, thoughts and things come from? And then how does this impact on the session? Because if we're not thinking about kind of how our behaviours, reflections are impacting on a session, then how are things going to change? And so then what we think about is the reflective process is always about what we keep and what we change in, how are we developing as individuals. So at the end of every reflective cycle, every Think Aloud process, we look at what we can keep and change as coaches. And like I've just mentioned there, in that video that you've just seen is kind of a snapshot or a section of what I call the Think Aloud program. And anyone can recreate the program themselves, and it's quite simple. So I take a group of coaches and introduce them to Think Aloud. Now you can probably imagine it's not an easy process to pick up. I'm asking people to verbalize their thoughts out loud and record them. And that is quite an uncomfortable and self-conscious process to start off with. Now it's important that when I deliver these workshops, I emphasize that the coach can be or is initially the only person to listen to their Think Aloud audio. Now, what we do get to a lot of the times when I'm doing group-based coach development work is the sharing of this Think Aloud audio, but initially I only promote kind of the coach listening back themselves. So I introduce the Think Aloud protocol to the coaches. We run through a series of different exercises, and hopefully by the end of workshop 1, coaches are quite comfortable to go out and use it. I then ask coaches to go and use Think Aloud within their natural coaching environment and iron out some of the logistical issues, such as the acoustics, depending on the sport that you're working in, depending on the proximity between you and the athlete, and whether, you know, it's logistically possible to verbalize your thoughts during your coaching session. Once the coaches have had a go at this, kind of once, twice, sometimes 3 times before the next workshop, and again, they get more and more comfortable each time with using it, I then ask coaches to listen back to one or some of these sessions, and using the kind of reflective questions that I've already discussed in the previous slide, just to jot down some of the things that they're really identifying about themselves through the Think Aloud process. Coaches will then come back to another group session, share their thoughts, their reflections, and engage in what we might call a social learning group, and they'll support one another in their development. So this process can run as many times as a group of coaches want. I've had individual coaches running this process throughout a year or a season. And each time they might then focus on something different when they engaging in their Think Aloud reflections during different coaching sessions. We've got a short audio clip here from Fiona, who is one of them coaches that engage in this on her own with my support. I introduced Fiona to Think Aloud, and she went away and used Think Aloud within her football sessions. And I asked Fiona just to kind of provide a short evaluation of her experiences of Think Aloud and what she thinks she's gained from that process.
Think Aloud has become an effective new addition to my coaching sessions and my match day routines. Through regular use, I have become more skilled in using Think Aloud. Initially, I had found myself commentating too much. I also found large gaps of silence in my recordings as I was forgetting to think aloud. But like any new skill, the more you practice it, the better you become. And Think Aloud has now become a very valuable tool to me as a coach. I actually refer to it now as my new virtual assistant coach and my virtual coach developer. It's very easily set up. All I needed was my mobile phone, a headset with the recording device, and I downloaded a voice recorder app. One thing I will advise people is let other people know that's going to be involved in the sessions that you are using the Think Aloud process, so that they don't think you're crazy talking to yourself on the sideline. But by verbalising your thoughts during your sessions and your games, by stepping back and observing why you're doing things, are you happy with what you're seeing? You're able then to make those adjustments and changes instantly. You're reflecting on your sessions and your matches in real time, as opposed to the common practice of reflecting on your training sessions after they have finished or after your matches have finished, which will be more beneficial to your players. It will improve you as a coach quicker, and it will also improve the sessions for those players. As a coach, you do become more self-aware. You're constantly asking yourself, why am I doing this? Am I happy with what I'm doing? Do I need to change anything? So you're improving yourself constantly as a coach. Also, by listening back, you can hear how you're communicating to everyone. Is there a difference in your communication style on match days where it might be deemed as a more pressurised environment? Or is your communication style just the same as what it is in training? So it's very valuable to that, to listen back to yourself in context of a football match and in training sessions. I also find it useful to hear the questions that the players were asking during your sessions or during your matches. It gives you a greater insight into who's asking the questions, and maybe that they're not understanding your communication style, and then you can adjust that accordingly, which then will improve that session for that player. It can be used in so many different ways, but you definitely do improve in many different areas as a coach. For me, I did find it more time efficient because I was able to reflect during the sessions, during matches. You were able to make the changes there and then. By recording what's happening, when you go back to reflect on your matches and your training sessions, you don't have to worry about forgetting anything because it's all been recorded. You can listen to it at a later time. We all don't have the luxury of being able to sit down straight away after our sessions and analyse what has just happened. It's just not practical sometimes. So with this being recorded, you can then look back at a later date. You can listen to it in your car on the way home. You can listen to it while you're doing other mundane tasks, maybe around the house. So I do find Think Aloud process is very effective. It's very time efficient. And I do find it a simple but very effective tool for coaches. And I would highly recommend any coach to try it.
Next slide, please, Jeff. Okay, so just to finish up then, one of the big questions that I always get from coaches is what should I reflect on? And when I first introduce Think Aloud to a coach, I don't give them anything specific to reflect on, because I want them to go out and have a think about, what is it that they think about and reflect on during a coaching session. So we kind of start with a blank canvas. But once we start to develop kind of the use of Think Aloud, I ask coaches to think about, what is your role as a coach? What do you think are the most important characteristics for you as a coach? And then we kind of start there as a basis, because the role of the coach is complex. You have a lot of roles and responsibilities, and there's a lot of elements to it. So Jeff, if you could just skip to the 2 slides across. So what I then do is, this is a basic sports psych tool that we use, and you guys probably use it all the time with your athletes, is to do a simple performance profile. So I often do this with coaches, where I ask them to think about the key characteristics or coaching behaviours that they think are important to them in their sport. And then I ask them to rank this in order of kind of importance, and then in order of where they see themselves kind of out of 10. And it's an easy, simple way to look at kind of the areas that they think that they need to work on the most. And this is something that you might start with then from a Think Aloud perspective. So if, questioning or communicating effectively, or kind of any one of those coaching behaviours that are important to you, you think you score a little bit lower on, that could be something that you might want to focus on during your reflective sessions, to think about how you might improve over a period of time. So that's kind of a really quick introduction to Think Aloud. Hopefully I've given you some ideas in how you might use Think Aloud yourself, but do feel free to get in touch with me via Twitter or email. And then I'm also going to run a workshop on the 26th of October around how we might use Think Aloud to help coaches with their well-being. So thanks very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Emmy Whitehead, for sharing your knowledge with us today. It was very interesting. So now I will present to you guys Jimmy Masina, former Special Olympics athlete, participating in football, athletics, and most notably floor hockey. Today, Jimmy is one of the Special Olympics South Africa's most senior and experienced officials. Jimmy has officiated a number of World Winter and Summer Games, including Pyeongchang, Grasse, Athens, Los Angeles, and Abu Dhabi. Jimmy is also an athlete leader and advises the Special Olympics South Africa office on sports-related matters. Welcome, Jimmy.
Oh, thank you. Good day, good morning. My name is Masina. Actually, Jimmy is a nickname. My name is Ntantla William, but I'm comfortable that you can call me Jimmy. I'm gonna share my story of my journey with officiating with Special Olympics. We are 5 in my family, but there's twins. There's Phil and Lindy. To me, I say that we are 5, but the reality are 6 because there's twins. That Phil and Lindy were. I joined Special Olympics. I started at the Elsin School. as you know that most of the people interested in it, they go to special school. Yeah. After that, as you know that because of the environment, I started to participate in athletics, even field event and sport event. And as you know that you just want to tap in and and uh, and find where you're gonna fit. Until when our school were invited to Special Olympics to come to attend coaches training. Coaches training, as you know, before you attend as you know that before that you attend training with Special Olympics, ELBS training at the time was called ELBS training and all that. And then I've been introduced I've been attending for the coaches training for 2 days. Was invited by Special Olympics South Africa, and even now, I don't know what they did in Special Olympics to steal my heart when I found my craft, my calling to 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 play floor hockey. Um, the way the way they on the training, the way they demonstrated was so easy for me to understand floor hockey. But before, I didn't understand anything about floor hockey. As you know, that the only most of the time is floor hockey come from ice hockey. So the only thing that I don't know was the only thing that I know was ice hockey and field hockey. I started to play hockey. I was selected to play as a goalie. I was playing at the back, and also I started to learn. As you know that anything that you learn from those training, you take it to the school. Likely when we train, you know that obviously we use whistle. I was bit by bit. I was trained understanding of shading, and after that, I went. And after that, as you know that as a as the build up, I started to have local game, uh, provincial game, national game. When I visited the last time on 2008 national game, that was the time that when I challenged myself that I want to apply for to officiate Special Olympics international. Um, when you apply, they take me to that was my first game in 2009 in Idaho. Uh, that time, what was key was also that to learn meet some of the official that they have experienced, especially those that I had that I meet someone that said to me that the one that they started floor hockey, especially because they're the one that they introduced. What uh, what was amazing the way that they welcome me. I learned something that I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna take it. Come back to Dedham as a as official here in South Africa. As you know that when you anything that you see on World Cup is a higher stage. When you come back, you exercise those things that you experience in Idaho. And also another one that I attended. I also I attended three of as they say three of Special Olympics winter game. When I come back there, I have motivation to see the stage of World Game, and also as you know that the 2000 the summer game, there's winter game. I do both. 2011, I apply again to go to Greece. That was to me was quite challenging to me personally because that I found out when I arrived in Greece, they said that I cannot drive because they need qualification that basic level 1. Luckily, that time I was going with my mentor, Philip Mpatlela, that is a sport manager for Special Olympics South Africa. When we give back the report to the local program, and of course to the region, and then luckily we started to Philip started to have a contact with local football association in South Africa, and also luckily on a province there was we have a volunteer that Mr. Madua is a part of football for South Africa, which means called by SAFA. We started we started to start those training in to learn but more about football that we can receive my level 1 certificate. Okay? And also what helped from the experience that we got in Greece, and also come back and say, you know, the target was 2012 for a regional tournament that was happening unified sport in Phuket. We able to attract other athletes to come join Special Olympics officiating. So that was the target that any athlete that's gonna pass to that test. As you know that there's practical side, there's theory side, but the test was written verbally. Philip ask me question, you will write down. What overwhelmed me was I got 70% of level 1 certificate in football. After that was a build up. Also after that, because I received the certificate, also I'll be able to attend 2015 summer game. Another one that I attended was 2019. That was in UAE. But in UAE, what helped me a lot, they put me as you know that I was only having 7 aside and 5 aside. What amazing 2009, I did unified uh, football, female and male. I was invited. I was told that I'm gonna do 11 aside. That was first time, but the support from the other official that okay, Jimmy, don't panic that you'll do it. That they give me basic, as you know, football. 7 aside and 5 aside is a breakaway from 11 aside. I think that was a new challenge for me. Mesh, I'd like to invite Mesh.
Greetings to everyone. Once when we were now preparing for today, Jimmy also mentioned 3 most important things that had molded him to be a great official. And those 3 things that he had mentioned was that leadership, mentorship, and coaching has been very vital. He has also mentioned that the trainings that he had participated in, both in sport, both in leadership, the trainings that he co-led, those have been very important to him as well, to put him in the platform where he is now. He has also mentioned that sport competitions have been really, they've been really been very important for him to be a great coach. So Jimmy, if you can just quickly summarize for us, what did you mean when you were mentioning the leadership, the mentorship, and the coaching? How did it impact your officiating?
I think what is key, Mesh, that to a mentor or a coach they need to understand the weaknesses of the athlete and the strengths, and also the support that I was getting on from my coaches, that they motivated me, and also my mentor to assist me as physically. As you know, there's a side that they need practically. That way we come in and help me physically. I think that was key, and also be a coach build up the confidence. And also I've been most of the time I was involved with source with Sosa, be to GOC organizing committee because most of the time I work for that time I was working for SOSA. Most of the time, as you know, that in Special Olympics, energy, maybe there's queries, maybe there's appeal in the sporting side. Also, they would invite me and come as an athlete to represent the athlete. Any decision that they might welcome, that part was also make me to grow personal, that understand more the movement.
Fantastic. When Jimmy is saying SOSA, that is when he was serving for Special Olympics South Africa. So Jimmy, what then helped you with the trainings? Were you part of the trainings as the co-lead, or were you being led? What was going on there, and how did it mold you to be where you are?
Was both. Was sometimes there's some of those one. Most of the time I was co-lead with Bonita, or some of them that with Philip as a football, depend what kind of sport we are doing. As you know, summer game or just fitting. And also what made me more was overwhelmed that I was invited to officiate in Nigeria and also train athletes, especially floor hockey and floorball. But floorball, I'm still learning. That's my new challenge to learn floorball. And also, what amazing about Nigeria, when we went to World Game, the team that we trained, they got a gold medal that was something say the support through that was showed as support for Special Olympics Nigeria, what they did, also what we train them, they take it further. When you see the end of the results of World Game that they received gold medal was so amazing. So, and also I'm a part of the team ALC, the regional athlete committee. What I do there, we advocate more for athletes that they get opportunity, especially if maybe want to add more sporting coach. That the other one that you can say represent to the team in Africa and say in Africa we need more sporting coach.
Fantastic. And lastly, on the point that you have mentioned with sport competitions, how did that help you to be the Jimmy that we know now?
I think myself, what was key, the coach that appointed me say that was key, because without the coach I wouldn't been even in Special Olympics. But go back to ground level, that they groom me, they prepare that when there's game, I'll go. When there's training, the coach makes sure that I attend those training. To me, I'll say without a coach, I wouldn't be here today. When even today, when I said one of my coaches there, I'm here, but I say thanks what the opportunities that they give me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jimmy. Jimmy said he is a great umpire and official and an athlete advocate in sports. And this is in and out of Special Olympics. And he is that because of great coaches and being given an opportunity. Thank you, Masina.
Thank you much.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank
Your
you, ma'am.
experience inspires and shows the importance of athletes in meaningful roles. Thank you so much for sharing.
Welcome, ma'am.
Now, I would like to introduce Glenn Cundari, founder and lead coach developer at Coach Plus, an advanced programming graduate of the only coach developer academy globally, Tokyo, Japan. Glenn has since returned to instruct in the programming on 2 occasions. Head coach in the Team Canada delegation at the 2019 Special Olympics World Games in Dubai. Welcome, Glenn.
Thank you very much, Manu, and thank you very much to everyone who's participating today. And I just want to say big congratulations to Manu and Jimmy for all their accomplishments in Special Olympics and the leadership they're taking. I know doing these types of events are not necessarily easy, and I know we have a number of Canadians on today, and I think it's important. If you're in Canada today, you'll see the whole country pretty much wearing orange today. So today is National Day of Truth and Reconciliation here in Canada. And it's a day that honors the Indigenous lost children and survivors of residential schools and their families. So it's a very important, meaningful day in the country. So I think it's important that we mention that, because I know there are other Canadians on the call today. So thanks very much to the SOI team for having me. We'll cut right to the chase here. And this first slide around reflective practice, I mean, this whole topic is so interesting to me. And you can see here some of this quote, and I'm not going to read it. It's there for you. But the idea that we're trying to do more than just think about things, right? We're trying to be meaningful and explicit in how we do that. So thank you to Dr. Amy for really highlighting one very interesting way that I'm going to continue to hopefully develop my reflection skills as a coach developer, and hopefully support coaches in a much more meaningful way with Think Aloud. But yeah, so reflective practice is very important, and I think this idea of coaches in the middle of a practice. We can head to the next slide. That would be great. This idea of thinking in practice and on practice, as Dr. Amy highlighted, for those who maybe that language is new, thinking in practice is exactly what you heard in Think Aloud, which is, what am I doing at the moment? Did that work? Did that not work? Why did it go so well? Why did it not? And that sort of self-talk. And then, this idea of at the end of practice, being able to think back and think about, how did it go? Hopefully in more specific questions than those kind of vague ideas, but we'll dig more into that in the workshop next week for those of you who join us. But yeah, definitely the concept of being quite strategic, thinking about things while you do them, thinking about things after, and really trying to have this kind of balanced approach to having a strategy, whether you're using Think Aloud or other processes that really help us think about having a balanced ledger sheet. And what I mean by that is not thinking about only the things that went great, and not only thinking about the things that maybe could be improved on. We need to find that balance. And if we spend a lot of our time just randomly thinking, I think there's a tendency to fall into that trap that Dr. Amy mentioned earlier about only focusing on negative things or being very reactionary to emotions. And I think when that happens, we maybe lose some of that higher order thinking, or that nice strategic thinking that will help us think about next steps. And we don't maybe do that. And so as a coach developer who works with coaches in different contexts, there's a university coaching staff in basketball that I work with who, when they reflect on practice, because the reflection is not particularly strategic, when I sit with them and listen to them reflect after a game especially, it just turns into half an hour of complaining about players, about referees, and there's very rarely are there any next clear steps on how players can do things different, or how coaches can be better. So, it's one of the things that we're working with them on, is to try and be a little clearer around what that means and how to do it per se. So next slide would be great. So as I mentioned, the idea of this kind of balanced approach, and it's okay for us to have the negatives, if we will, but we can't spend all of our time there. And I think this is where having specific tools are beneficial. And what I'd like to do is actually spend the next few minutes just actually looking at specific tools that we've developed and how we use them and why we use them. and so to be clear, I'm a practitioner in the field. I'm not a researcher. I'm certainly not an expert in this part of coach development. That said, I spend a lot of time thinking about reflection, and I feel competent at it. But with that said, lots to learn, and I appreciate listening to everyone here today. So yeah, you'll see in the next couple slides after this, making sure we're covering off deficit-based things, or things that could be better, as well as things that are going well. And for me, this idea of reflection also, I would prefer to have a very narrow focus, try and be very clear on what we're trying to achieve, rather than trying to reflect on a lot of things over a large period of time. No different than when we're coaching athletes. If we give them many topics and many key teaching thoughts, it can be a bit overwhelming and a bit confusing for them. So again, maybe if we want to head to the next slide, we can show you a couple of examples of some tools that we've built around it. So when we work with coaches, we have them do some reflection processes. They then complete a development plan, and we decide what we're going to focus our work on over the course of a season. And in this case, you can see Coach Rami, for him, getting a little emotional, let's say, in basketball games was absolutely a thing for him. A lot of yelling at referees, a lot of yelling at players, clipboards and water bottles being thrown in the locker room. And so, he brought a lot of strengths to the table, but this was something that he wanted to be better at. And I think his players more or less were demanding that. So we started to say, okay, like, why are we reflecting? Right? Like, what's the purpose? What are the outcomes? And so we'd be very clear on explicitly stating the objective. And when are you going to reflect? So yes, of course, I think at the moment, if he would lose his patience or become emotional in a game, that at that moment he would have second thoughts and reflect and say, I wish I wouldn't have done that. But in those cases, the reflections were quick and transient, especially in games, because the next play would be happening and he'd have to make substitutions. And so there wasn't a lot of time per se. So in this case, with his emotional control, we would really have him, we created this, actually, it's a notepad. He would just rip off a page and complete this short sort of check-in at the end of a match or a game. And then he would also look at it again in the morning and see if he still felt that it was appropriate, and would make some changes to his check-in. So in this case, the how was this notepad that we developed, and you can see that he has to identify his pre-game, in-game, and post-game arousal levels. And then we used to talk a lot about, reacting to players and situations rather than responding in a sort of semi-controlled way. And then he had to rate whether his arousal levels and his emotions were helping or hurting the performance of the team. So he would do this post-game and then in the mornings. And he had challenges. It was difficult for him to do on his own. So he did need help. He needed help actually from players to get feedback, because he wasn't always aware of some of his body language or, his talking under his breath that people could hear. And he needed some help, working through these kind of debriefs and reflections with me. Then, of course, the whole point of this is to think about what's next and what now. So we would, implement strategies at practice so he could practice these things at his own practices. So we can go to the next slide. You'll see a different type of reflection tool. And this is also, I don't do everything on notepads, but this was also a notepad we developed with a university volleyball coach. And, he sort of struggles day to day with self-confidence and feels that, he's maybe not as good as people think he is. And I think most people would suggest he's a very high level coach. And so you can see here that we would, he, at the end of the day, he would do some check-ins and just sort of, reflect on the day as a whole, whether it's his role as a parent or a spouse or as a coach. So again, trying to work through these 5 key questions that that were important to him, and facilitate with them. So this is not about, as Amy suggested with Think Aloud, that it's a facilitated process until coaches can get more confidence in the skill of reflecting and just not just thinking about things in a transient manner. So I think, yeah, let's head to the second last slide, and we'll try and be nice and efficient for this so we can stay on agenda for the day. You'll see this sort of last quote, and some of you maybe know Dr. Wade Gilbert or read his wonderful book, but Wade is definitely one of the leaders in sort of reflective practice in the sport context, and I love this idea. Why wait for the disaster to have open and frank conversations? And I think if we I feel pretty confident, and others, especially academics, can confirm or deny, but I feel pretty confident that if we went around to the coaches that we feel are most functional and highest achieving, that they're probably one of the main behaviors is their ability to reflect in a less emotional way, a more systematic approach, that at the end of the day, how you reflect is irrelevant to me in the field. The whole point of this is to develop clear and actionable next steps on how coaches can coach more effectively, whether that's Think Aloud, whether that's using notepads, whether that is talking it out with someone, whether it's using other types of tools that certainly exist. There's lots out there. This is the underpinning, is next steps. It's not, there may be an element of venting in there, and that might feel good at the moment, but if it doesn't create actionable next steps so that coaches then later have to think, much like athletes, we want coaches to be able to think about their practice in practice as well. So when I am practicing if I'm the tennis coach again, and I'm practicing being a more effective questioner, I'm hoping that prior to me intervening with the athlete to ask questions, I'm considering, how might I do this? What am I going to change? What new words am I going to use? And that should, if you will, be a fallout from the last set of reflections. So there is definitely this circle, and I think Amy had that in her circle sort of graphic diagram. So I think for the most part, we will leave that there. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, and I know there'll be some information. There we go on the workshop. So we'll dig in a much more meaningful way, and maybe even practice doing some reflection activities and those things in this workshop. So thank you for SOI for putting that slide together. And I will turn it back to Manu, who's an amazing host. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Glenn. And don't forget to register for Glenn's workshop. It's a limited capacity, maximum 40 participants. It's a first come, first serve. Registration is via link in the chat right now, and notify via email that registration was successful. So register and wait for an email for registration successfully. And please only register if you'll be present on the workshop. Do not take up a place on the workshop if you will not be in the attendance. Thank you so much, Glenn. Now, I will present Declan OLeary. Declan works for Sport Ireland Coaching in the development of coaches. He has particular interest in good coaching practice for young people and for people with disabilities. He is a founding member of ICOACHKIDS. Welcome, Declan.
Hi, Manu. Thank you very much, and thank you for being such a nice host. Thank you also to Jimmy, Amy, and Glenn for your very interesting, inspiring, and informative presentations. I am part of the ICOACHKIDS global movement, and you're all invited to be part of that also. But what I'm presenting to you here today is part of the learning resources that are included in the ICOACHKIDS, on the ICOACHKIDS website, and it's part of MOOC 3. MOOC stands for Massive Open Online Course, and the MOOC is titled Coaching on the Ground, Planning, Doing and Reviewing, and it's included in Chapter 4, What was Lifelong Learning for Coaches. We wanted to place reflection in the context of lifelong learning, and this is a definition used in the European Union. It is the ongoing voluntary and self-motivated pursuit of knowledge for either personal or professional reasons. Therefore, it not only enhances social inclusion, active citizenship and personal development, but also self-sustainability. So lifelong learning is very good, and it benefits you and it benefits those that you work with. What I wanted to do was for you to consider that in the context of the story of two coaches. And you can slow down there, Jeff. I'm going to speak a little bit before we put up the questions. Picture two coaches who've been coaching for 10 years. One coach says, I'm the coach, I'm quite authoritarian in what I do. The season I run is fairly defined. I will offer that season to the athletes I work with. And when that season finishes, I put it away and take it out for the next season. So while I've been coaching for 10 years, I've coached the same way and with the same activities, the same way over the 10 years. Picture then a second coach who plans their season, taking account of the needs of the athletes they work with. And as the season goes on, reviews what's happening and takes on board things from the voice of the athletes, the voice of parents, the views of other coaches, learns from what works during training sessions, learns from what works at competition and events, thinks about their own coaching, and at the end of the season, looks at it, looks at their coaching philosophy, and then makes notes for the next season. So that second coach not only has 10 years experience, but they've grown and evolved over the 10 years to be the coach they are today. So if you think about those two coaches, you are left with two questions. Jeff, could we pop them up, please? What coach would you like your athletes to be coached by? And secondly, which coach would you consider yourself to be? So that's the reason for placing that within lifelong learning, that it can help you to grow as a coach. Next slide, please, Jeff. Being an effective coach is about learning, and I wanted to introduce the word effective there because everybody has to start as a coach, but it's through your practice and through your learning that you can improve as a coach. The ways you learn, the learning can have, you're learning, you're helping the athletes to learn through your coaching, but you also keep on learning if you take on board what's happening in front of you and the growth of your knowledge. We would also encourage people to play a supporting role, encouraging and assisting other coaches to learn. And we think that's very important, and it would relate to roles that Amy and Glenn mentioned about facilitating learning, using mentors, or being part of a community of practice. However, this is about you. It's about your own journey and your own learning. That's your responsibility. So to do that, you can contribute by being open-minded, which we think is the first thing. And being open-minded provides you with that platform to be open to taking things on board. And Jeff, the next one, please. Reflecting on, that should say, your own coaching. Because your coaching is experiential, and if you learn from it, you will become a better coach. Next slide, please. Okay. reflective tools for coaches, and really what we've had from Amy and Glenn are two very practical examples. But both, what they have in common is that you're learning on the job. And it is very true to say that on the job is called experience, but learning on the job is experiential learning. And you can have experience without learning. That's the concept of being open-minded. So what can you reflect on? Well, you can reflect on your personal coaching philosophy and coaching skills. And I'll mention that more again shortly. You can look at the program that you deliver and if it benefits the athletes. But you can also look at if you, your co-coaches, or the environment you coach, are they truly athlete-centered? So you can actually reflect on all aspects of your coaching. But I think it's interesting, both Amy and Glenn made the point that you're better off being specific. And I would add that reflection is a learned skill. And you know about learning skills, you do it in small bits regularly, and then it'll allow you to grow. Next slide, please. Part of looking at your overall program and looking to be specific, within the ICOACHKIDS material, we identified the coach decision-making model. And that's included in MOOC 1, Chapter 1. It's sort of an overall framework for what we try to do. And really, I won't go into a lot of depth on it because it's on the materials on the ICOACHKIDS website. But what it does is, in the white box, it looks at the culture and context and where you are, and the policies and so on. The who, how, and what are you coaching is a very useful one to take cognizance of the athlete you're coaching, being athlete-centered, and having the content of your coaching helping them. You do that then through and use your understanding of yourself, beliefs, values, and behaviors, which is the blue circle. And then you do what Glenn identified there as you plan, you do, review, plan again, do it again, and review. So you go through that cycle, which is designed to be continuous improvement. So that's just an overall framework on how you can actually identify all of what you do before you get specific into where you might reflect. When you come to the specifics, next slide, Glenn, please. We speak about your coach's toolkit. And the toolkit is all the bits that you use as a coach. Fairly basic when you're a beginner coach, but as you get more experienced and learn from it, you can get very nuanced in the use of these tools. So the following are the tools: setting up your practice and standing back and seeing if it's effective. Other tools you use will be explanations, demonstrations, questioning and listening, feedback, and how you provide it, and also how good you are at reflection. These can all be learned in a fairly basic way, but if you take a focus on any one of them, the specific focus that Amy and Glenn did, Amy identified your communication, which would feed in there to explanations, questioning, listening, and feedback. And Glenn was very specific on how this might happen, not only at training, but also in competition, because that's an important focus again. So the point here is that it's only when you get specific, it's only when you reflect, it's only when you identify how you might improve that you can do that. And there's a little piece after popping in there under the photograph, which is observe other coaches, video yourself. In Amy's example, she used thinking out loud recordings, and Glenn used notes that people could have on sheets. So it's possible for you to capture your coaching, see if it's as good as you want it to be, and go on from there. The video that Amy played identified how Coach Mooney said she forgot to do this stuff initially, but as she got better at being a reflective coach, she got better at coaching, going so far as to call it her assistant coach and her coach developer. That's what coaching practice can do for you if you reflect and learn from it. Next slide, please, Glenn. Okay, opportunities for you to learn. In workshop 1, we identified that your learning can be through mediated, unmediated or internal learning opportunities. Mediated are ones like we're on here on the webinar. Unmediated are ones you will decide to do, perhaps link to this workshop, link to this webinar afterwards, and internal is your continued growth as a coach. But your best sources and for learning opportunities are the following: the athletes you coach. They will challenge you, and if you can answer based on their needs and wants, you are going to become a better coach and a more effective coach. You're also a great source for learning by being open-minded, being reflective, and then, as both Amy and Jeff identified, acting on it so you self-direct your own learning and growth. Other coaches, which we've mentioned already, including co-coaches, mentors, or even a community of practice. Your own environment, whether it is fully athlete-centered, child-centered, and as well as that, the parents, families of those you support can help as well. We'll just finish off the list. You've got formal or mediated coach education courses. You'll come across continuous development opportunities like this series of webinars and workshops. And then what you can contribute is your own reading and viewing, but doing what Jeff said, which was identify your action and then following it through into the plan, do, review cycle. So that sort of brings to the end of that part of the iCoachKids. The website is on www.icoachkids.org, and as part of this webinar series, a special interest group has been established by Jeff and Fiona, and I think you could become part of that to continue your discussion following this and to continue to improve your coaching. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Declan. All your information is very important. And as I said before, my coach was always there for me. I was asking how I was feeling. I was wanting to know how I was. So I think that's very important to get to know your athlete and to get a close relationship to your athlete. So you can help develop and you can help inside the playing field. I think that's very important. Thank you so much. Now we have the Q&A, and I have some questions for each of you today. I will start with Dr. Emmy Whitehead. So the question is, if we find our thinking aloud feedback to be very negative on ourselves, how can we adjust this to be more positive? Or is it okay for it to be negative?
Thanks for the question. And yeah, absolutely. I think it's more than okay to be negative. But what Think Aloud does is it helps us to recognize, like, one, how negative we are, how that negativity is affecting us and the athletes that we're coaching. And then I think next time we go into our coaching session and we use Think Aloud, we can put some strategies in place to prevent or stop us, I guess, being negative if it is having a negative effect on us and our athletes. So I think being aware of that negativity is the first step, and then trying to change that moving into the next coaching session.
Thank you. Now my question is to Jimmy Masina. How does your experience of being an unofficial at the World Games help you when you educate new officials?
I think was so helpful that to get the experience from one game. That was motivation for especially where I'm based in South Africa, because like when I come back, I share with them with many athletes, and that was a motivation. Also, when the second one, when I attended the one that I think was still 2013 World Game, that we were able to take. We have two athletes, so which means we have more athletes to official on World Game. One athlete that is official, another one female one was doing the scorekeeping. That was the motivation for them, that they saw if I will qualify, even them, which means they can qualify, because most of the time they have on the same league, same game. That was a motivation. Say we can apply more, which means because of the standard is high. As you know, even when you see game that they do game, that you can come back and practice, and also and take that experience, even them learn what you learned there. So that was a motivation. Even me in South Africa, I have three athletes from Africa, official World Game. That was motivation for them.
Thank you so much, Jimmy.
Thank you.
Now, my question is to Glenn. Would you recommend new coaches to experiment with the type of reflection they do? For example, reading or ADO?
That is a fantastic question, and the answer is absolutely yes. I think if you're new, if you're a new coach or even an experienced coach new to maybe paying more attention to your reflection, this is the perfect time to experiment with as many different varieties of reflecting as possible. I think, like an athlete, when they're learning how to serve in volleyball, they learn different ways, and they learn different strategies that work, and so for sure, as coaches, let's try a whole bunch of different ways of doing it. And there's ways to do that, either connecting with people here or simply Googling some information. So yeah, I think try them out, make notes of what worked, and you might even invent your own that nobody else is doing, a combination of certain things. So yeah, that's a great question, and thank you for that. Definitely.
Thank you. Now my question is to Declan. How would you focus on your reflection on if your coaching is truly athlete-centered? How do I make sure I am not biased?
That's a very good and interesting question again. I think we must recognize that when reflection is a learned skill, you're not expected to be very good at it initially, but if you do practice a lot of a little, you're open-minded, you're honest but fair in your assessment of what's happening. That's important. However, if you only do it by yourself, you of course might have a bias, and I think we must all recognize that we all have biases. Even if we think we're very open, we have those. So the suggestions made by Glenn and Amy, and perhaps myself as well, around your co-coaches working with them, getting feedback from your athletes, working with a mentor, or even in a community of practice is important. The suggestion I made, which was building on what Amy said about recording your thinking out loud by using a video. Some coaches have never seen themselves on screen or listen to their own voices. So once they get over the novelty of that, they're very useful tools to help in that. And as I say, it's just, if you're open, you're honest and fair in your reflection, both in what works well, which is an important consideration, but also areas that you can set action steps that'll help you to become a more balanced coach over time.
Thank you so much. All the great questions and all the great answers. And thank you so much for all your presentations. I know that we learned a lot here today. And thank you so much. Now we have a poll Similar to the first webinar, we would like to know which topic you want for webinar 6. So please vote on this poll that is appearing on your screen. For those that already voted, thank you very much. Now, don't forget to visit our resources page to access sport-specific resources like the new winter sport coaching guides. You will also find some excellent resources on the ICOACHKIDS website, where you can join the Special Olympics interest group. And also, don't forget to register for the next week webinar. We have amazing speakers next week. And we'll be talking about develop the whole person. Those are the very awesome presenters next week, and will be hosted by Adrian Dominguez. Don't miss. So thank you all who attended the second webinar of the series. Thank you to our presenting partner Gallagher and supporting partner iCoachKids. See you.